Hello, my name's Kim and this is another video in the series I'm doing where I'm reading books inspired by D&D classes. This is part 2 of a video about mages, so warlocks, wizards and sorcerers. If you want to see more in the series you can check out the link to the playlist. But yeah, to get into it, I have a couple of books that I really want to read. There is an abundance of books about wizards in this one and witches. They're just so much easier to find and I've kind of been stockpiling them a little bit over the past like couple of months since I filmed the last one, so that I knew what it is I wanted to read for this video. So to start off, the reason that this video was postponed until now is because Awakened by A.E. Osworth was my #1 pick for reading about mages. This is about middle-aged trans witches and that's pretty much all I know. There's also AI, and this is one that has kind of creeped up on my radar and I'm really excited to read and just see more about it. And in a similar vein, I have another trans witches book, which is The Sapling Cage by Margaret Killjoy. This was on my tentative TBR for the first video and I ended up not reading it, but I do have it, so I want to get to it, so that's another book that I want to read for this. Then in two more witchy wizard veins, I also have The Weird Sisters by Terry Pratchett. This is the next book in the Discworld series. I read Sorcery for the last video and I wasn't intending to read another Discworld book, but because I'm reading them in chronological order I didn't realise that The Weird Sisters was next, and it's also about witches. So I thought, #1, it's another book for the video. #2, it helps me knock off my goal of reading more Discworld books because I'm hoping to get to book 8 at least by the end of the year, which would mean reading 4 books this year, and this would be my second one. So The Weird Sisters is one that I want to read. And then I also have Isabella Nag and the Pot of Basil by Oliver Darkshire. This is one I picked up when I was in Lincoln a couple of weeks back, and it's about this lady who somehow gets this wizard's book, and there is like a demon in the cat or something like that. It literally says cozy, full of wit and Pratchettian footnotes, so it feels very kind of poetic to be reading a Pratchett and something kind of Pratchett-esque in this video. I also have Mirrored in Evergreen by B. Pigeon on my Kindle, which is another book about wizards. I know this one deals a lot with grief, and it's another one that I had kind of on my tentative TBR for the first video, but it just ended up that I didn't pick it up at the time and I went for some other ones. That means that I'm reading 5 wizard related books, 5 witchy wizard books, and not much more about sorcerers and warlocks. There is White Trash Warlock. I still am unable to get it from my library, so I am going to take a look into that one because I think that one's meant to be quite humorous and that would be nice to read, because warlocks are the ones that I'm really suffering from. I can barely find warlock related books, and I know that like terminology wise warlock is probably more of a D&D related word, and so it's not necessarily that there are books that feature warlock super heavily, but I was still hoping to find some anyway. I read quite a few sorcerer related books in the first video, and that is kind of an abundance of books about sorcerers. I think there's Sorcery and Small Magics that I saw, and there's also there was another one, I can't remember now. I'm kind of my goal basically is to get through the ones that I physically own or I have as an ebook, and then after that we'll see, because that's already 6-ish books, which is quite a few. Originally in my first video I said I was going to read Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer. I'm not. It's a really chunky book and I don't really feel in the mood for reading something so big right now. I do hope that I can get to it at some point this year, but we'll see. I might see if it fits into another category. The reason I picked it for this one in the first place because obviously it has mage in the title, but if it's got some other aspect to it then maybe it'll fit into another related video, I don't know. Anyway, those are the books that I'm planning on reading for this video. I'll probably start with The Weird Sisters because I've got it out from Libby, and so obviously there's a deadline for when I need to return it, but otherwise Awakened, I'm coming for you. I was really excited for it to be finally released and to get it. I am 50% of the way into Weird Sisters. I'm liking it so far. It is actually, I didn't realise, it's essentially a retelling of Macbeth, but told in a Discworldian way. We have 3 witches who are reluctantly a coven. We have a king who was killed and whose child has been whisked away, and we have a duke who's replaced the king who has a very annoying a very demanding wife, who is very into torture. and there's ghosts and there's other things floating around as well, and the ghosts are communicating with the witches because they have the magic. I am liking it so far. I think it's a bit of an easier Discworld read compared to some of the other books that I've read. Sorcery hopped around quite a lot, whereas this one, even though it follows like different protagonists, the story feels a little bit more in one vein, whereas Sorcery kind of felt like it was a little bit everywhere. I think this one feels quite similar to Mort in that it feels like it has one direct storyline, which with Mort it was mostly Mort and his experience growing up and finding death and having that relationship. Whereas Sorcery was about the kid who was a sorcerer and all the different magic things going on and everything like that. So this one I think is a win. It's also such an easy read because it's Discworld, and so I'm finding myself get through it quite quickly. So maybe I'll finish it tonight, who knows. I have finished Weird Sisters. It's going to be 4 stars. I actually really enjoyed it. It's such a Macbeth retelling, but done in such a nice way where you don't need to know that much about Macbeth to get that it's a Macbeth reference. But if you know, I haven't studied Macbeth in years, but even I was able to pick up on the majority of the references, and there's probably stuff that I missed, but just the story itself where there's a new king who's taken over, who's got a really scheming wife, and there's a ghost of the old king, and there's 3 witches, which is the most overt reference. There's a little homage to "Is this a dagger I see before me?" And at the end, another reference that I really liked was as one of these characters is essentially running away, they think that the trees are moving, which is obviously a reference as well. So it was, and I should say as well, like theatre plays such a big role in this one, and I think that just makes it such a nice way to honour a famous play, that theatre plays such a huge role in solving the issues that are going on. I just think it's a good way to do a retelling. I definitely preferred it more than Sorcery. I think Sorcery was a little bit harder to follow, and I think, sorry to the wizards, I think the wizard storyline is one of my least favourites out of the ones that I've read. I didn't, Equal Rights is the first of the witches storyline, and I mind that one, but I like Weird Sisters a lot more, and there's only been one deaf one so far, and that's still one of my favourites. Sorry, I'm making breakfast right now. What else was I going to say? Oh yeah, that brings me up to 2, I literally can't multitask, I need to do one at a time. It brings me up to 2 Terry Pratchett books, Discworld books that I've read so far this year. My aim is to get to Guards by the end of the year, so I've got 2 more now, and then I'll hit that goal. So the next one is Pyramids, which is a standalone, so I'm quite interested in that because so far all the ones I've read are part of like the series. So we've got the Wizard series, we've got the Witches, and we've also got Death. I don't think I'm missing anything there. And then after that is Guards, which is the first of the City Watch, which is very popular. If loads of people recommend that people just start with Guards because people enjoy it so much. So I'm looking forward to reading the 2 of those because I think it's going to be different to the ones that I read before. And then we've still got a couple more before, because I think the one after that is another Wizards one. I'm waiting for another Death one because Death is one of my favourites. I think it's such a nice little touch whenever he appears in every single book, because he's very humorous. We love Death from Discworld in this house. I really need to just not say I'm going to read this book next because I can't stick to that. I just don't stick to it. I bring you updates on not 1, not 2, but 2.5 books. I went to Leeds Fest over the weekend. I saw Chaperone, I saw Hosier. It was a good time, and in that time I finished 2 books and I got partway through another. So I started with Mirrodin Evergreen, because I wasn't going to take a physical book with me, but I thought maybe I would take one of the smaller ones. But Mirrodin Evergreen is one that I had digitally anyway. And so this is the one that follows this wizard who has been cursed. So everyone in his life has forgotten who he is, including his boyfriend, his family, and they think that there's this other wizard who has maybe put this curse on him, and the point is that they need to try and figure out how to break this curse, and he's helped by his boyfriend who doesn't know that they're dating, plus this other lady who seems to have some ulterior motives. Unfortunately, this one wasn't a hit for me. I just thought it was a bit boring, to be honest. It's fairly short, so I was kind of just going through it and I was like, I don't really want to not read it because it is so short. The characters were just a little bit bland. The plot itself, I feel like could have been more interesting. There's obviously the fact that the main character Rosemary and his boyfriend Rowan, they have this relationship where Rosemary is obviously hiding the fact that they have been together from Rowan, because Rowan doesn't know. And the kind of, I guess, angst that could be around that, and it's not really there. The plot seems to centre more on this lady who is supposedly helping them, and she has her own ulterior motives, which is fine, but it doesn't feel like the world building is really there to kind of put everything in place, and I think that's kind of what was lacking the most for me. So it's a 3. It was just fine. Like, I just read through it, I kept on stopping and starting, and then I was like, you can't really stop and start like a 200-page book. Like, you might as well just sit and finish it. So I just tried to finish it. On the flip side, I also then started White Trash Warlock, and this one was a real surprise win for me. I ended up giving it 5 stars. It is an urban fantasy. We have our main character Adam, who has powers, and he is what's classed as a witch. Warlocks in this world are people who essentially have decided to become bad magic users. And Adam is estranged from his family. He is searching for his dad. He doesn't have a good relationship with his mum and his brother because his brother put him in an asylum when he was younger because they didn't believe him, or at least they thought it was easier to deal with him and his magic by putting him in asylum because they didn't have the same skill as them, even though it kind of was a little bit there. And so he obviously doesn't have a good relationship with them, but it ends up that his brother's wife is kind of possessed, and he returns to this place where he thinks he maybe can find a connection to his dad, and sees this kind of strange thing that's going on there, and he ends up wanting to try and figure out what exactly is going on. There's elves here, there's gnomes, there is a flicker of romance. The romance in here was kind of like just fine for me. There's kind of like, I don't want to say it's a love triangle because it isn't, but there's a pre-established ex relationship and there is a new relationship. The ex relationship was just fine for me. The new relationship does that thing where, maybe a little bit of a spoiler, but they're kind of like being able to feel each other's pain, and I guess, and kind of almost like have that soul connection, which is definitely a favourite trope of mine, because, you know, not being able to hide what you're feeling from another person, like, I love that trope, which is definitely something that made this a more fun story for me. And that it doesn't even feature that much. I wanted more of that, but it didn't really feature a lot, so I am thinking that I probably will pick up the sequel because I want to see how that plays out. I thought it was really well written. It was really kind of fast paced and kept moving. The world was built enough that, like, I just felt like I was just intrigued by it. Like, I checked halfway through my train journey and I was like, how far in this book even am I? And I was like 42% of the way through already, and I didn't even feel like that. So it was a really easy one to dive into. I would recommend it if you are interested for a more urban fantasy book. And yeah, I'm looking kind of forward to seeing it. It's really funny because, you know, oh, White Trash Warlock, I was like, that's kind of a funny title. Maybe it'll be like just a kind of tongue-in-cheek. The story that I thought it would kind of be like is the Bald Gay Werewolf story, which I didn't really enjoy that much. I kind of wasn't that keen on, but it is more serious than that, and I think it was just really well done, so I'm really happy to have read that. And I definitely want to pick up another book in that series and keep reading it. Then the half of the 2.5 is Isabella Nag and the Pot of Basil by Oliver Darkshire. I am 80 pages through. It's only 210 250 pages, 210, and so I started this on my train home, but alas, I was tired. I had been up late listening to Chapel and Hosier and trying to get back and wandering around with my sister in Leeds, so I ended up just reading a little bit because I didn't want to just, you know, I couldn't take it that much in because I was just that tired. In this one we have our character Isabella. She is married to Mr. Nag, who they don't have the best relationship. It's kind of one of those ones where it is meant to be kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's clear that they're kind of just married because they had to be married. But Mr. Nag ends up stealing a book from a wizard and brings it home, and she's not very happy, but then she ends up kind of just getting over it a little bit and deciding to read the book and learns some magic. And the story kind of progresses from there, in that she now is in possession of all of these magic books that make you the magic user. And there's also a side plot with goblins. There are these little goblins that pop up every so often, and they have this fruit which is like kind of toxic to humans, and so I'm kind of a little bit curious as to what's going on. There's kind of a hint because there's a bit of a prologue about what might happen, but she is now the owner of these magical books. There's a cat that's a demon that's now kind of binded to her, I guess, because she's now the magic user. There's a donkey that's a talking donkey, and there is the pot of basil as well, which I'm not going to spoil too much about that, but it's interesting. It's one that's quite tongue-in-cheek. We have a lot of footnotes, very reminiscent of like Emily Wilde, where you have these footnotes that kind of, I mean, obviously add a little bit to the story, but also I guess like Terry Pratchett, where the footnotes are kind of linked to Emily Wilde in the sense that they are like giving factual evidence about something that happened. But I also think a lot of them are more tongue-in-cheek, similar to the way that the Terry Pratchett footnotes often are. Like, for example, there's one talking about how Mr. Nag doesn't like this meal that Isabella makes, and then there's a footnote that says he has a recurring nightmare in which he was chased by a looming morass of it. And just like small things like that adds to the context of the story, but like it's not like a necessary footnote, if that makes sense. It's just there to kind of be a bit humorous. I definitely think I'll be able to get through this fairly quickly, so that is my goal. And then I'm going to read a little bit of both Awakened and The Sapling Cage, I think, and see which one I want to read first, and do a little bit of try a few chapters of each, because I don't really know which one I want to pick up first. I know that I want to read Awakened, like it's a really anticipated book for me, but I'm also intrigued by The Sapling Cage, so I'm going to try a little bit of both, hopefully today, so that I can just get on with reading them throughout the week. That's my update. I am off to finish unpacking my bags, listen to a bit more Chapel, and I'll see you next time. Finished Isabella Nag. It's going to be a 3-star. I thought that the end was fine. It was just I don't want to say cozy, because there's some very uncozy things happening in it, but it was relatively low stakes. Again, maybe not. But it kind of fits that vibe more than kind of a full-blown fantasy, high fantasy story, I should say. Definitely is one that's full of humour, and the footnotes and things like that. I think that once you get further in a story, you can get a bit of a sense of where the plot is going. But it was a relatively quick read, so if you are looking for something light to read, I do recommend it. I also very quickly read the prologue and the first chapter of Awakened, and also the first chapter of The Sapling Cage. I think I'm going to start with Awakened, but just to give you a bit of an introduction, we follow our main character Laurel, who wants to become a witch, but witches are girls, and she is not presenting as a girl at that point. Only her best friend, who is supposed to be a witch but wants to be a knight, and her mom know, and at the very end of the first chapter, the witch coven come for her best friend, and she goes in her best friend's place, and that's where we left off with the first chapter of The Sapling Cage. Awakened, we have a prologue where there is a woman who is burning a bunch of technology and technology related things, and then we have a first chapter where we have our main character Walder, who is on their 31st half birthday, and doesn't quite realise yet, but they have suddenly become able to understand all languages, and just a glimpse of the next chapter is that the Wilder didn't realise that not only that they knew other languages, but also that they were being watched. So this one is the one that writing wise drew me in first, and I'm kind of not surprised, because obviously this is the one that I was looking forward to reading, so this is definitely going to be my next pick. Speedrun book update. I am 100 pages into Awakened. So far we have Walder learning about their magic, we have them being introduced to this local coven who specifically looks out for when trans people have been awakened, which is the cause of them developing their magic essentially, obviously the title of the book as well. And Walder is kind of insecure about a lot of things and really struggling to come to terms with things. I think understandingly it's quite overwhelming because there is a level of control that they also need to have to make sure that with these languages they're not essentially being like bombarded by constantly understanding other people's languages. It's like it can't be turned off, but it can be like turned down, and so they're hoping that they can learn how to do that. But their interactions with the coven, there's 3 other people who all have different powers and who all have kind of obviously mastered their skill, and I think for Wilder there is a sense of like wanting to belong but also just not being able to cope with what's going on currently. There's a hint of information about the technology stuff as well, like that's going on. That one of the characters, Artemis, she can sense that technology is playing up, and it happened around the time that Wilder became awakened, and so they think that there's some sort of connection there, but other than that, that hasn't really been focused on yet, so I'm interested to see where that goes. I also am a liar because I did continue reading The Sapling Cage, but only because when I went on Libby to see what books are available to borrow, it just so happened that it was available to borrow, so I can obviously read it on my lunch break now, because I don't bring my physical books with me to work, so I tend to read on my phone if there's anything that I have out from the library. And so I thought, well, I might as well make the most of time this week and read it digitally if I've got the chance. So I'm 40% of the way through at the moment. We have Laurel, who has now gone off with these witches and is beginning to learn about different things. Specifically, the kind of process of developing magic or learning magic is kind of a long drawn out process. At the moment, they're looking at how to protect themselves and the other whelps that are all the young girls who are training to be witches. There's also this side plot about this magic that is, or this blight that's killing the trees, and so they're finding out what is linked to that, and that kind of links to the title, The Sapling Cage, and everything like that. There's also a lot of a mix of like kind of like hysteria, like some people really like the witches and what they've done, but other people really hate the witches, and there are these tax knights who also are there and kind of essentially are preventing the witches from being able to meander through towns and get the supplies they need and stuff. So there's a lot of kind of other background stuff that's going on. Story wise, it's quite slow. It is a little dull at times as well, I think, because the plot just feels a little bit jumpy. Laurel is one of the people who helps uncover that someone was betraying the witches, and now is convinced that if they find out that she's lying to them because she is not actually who she says she is, that she will also suffer the consequences. And so there's a lot of link to the gender identity there as well, which I think is going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. But that feels like such a small part of it at the moment, because so much of it is also focused on the witches and this blight and the training and the relationship with the other young whelps and how they don't maybe necessarily get along, or they do get along, and all those different things. So I'm just gonna kind of wait and see. I think I'll probably finish it today, if not tomorrow. I'm preferring Awaken more at the moment, so I'm gonna get back to reading some of that tonight when I'm back home. A quick update before I head out. I finished The Sapling Cage. I'm giving it a 3. I think the fault with this one is very similar to Mirrored Evergreen, where the characters are kind of quite flat. They have maybe one point that makes them stand out, but other than that, especially a lot of the other young witches in this book, they all kind of felt the same. There was very little difference between them, and so it didn't really feel like there was anything really drawing you in. You had your main character Laurel and the secrets that she's hiding, obviously that she's trans, and her worry about how the rest of the coven's going to react, and then them figuring out that she's trans, and that is not like a major plot point. It does have discussion about what it means to be a trans witch, and this one is not so over in critiquing J.K. Rowling, whereas Awakened literally has a mention of that in the front 2 little bit, what are they called? I don't remember. I was discussing this with someone yesterday and I don't remember. I still don't know what it's called, in the 2 section, and so it still is, I think, a good discussion about what it means to be involved in a community where typically you are maybe not at first accepted by that community. I think that discussion in here was good. I just think the actual fantastical plot and the magic kind of system and everything was just a bit flat, to be honest, which is a little bit sad. I have read one Margaret Killjoy before, but it was like a really short novella, like I'm talking 30 pages, about a mermaid. I don't think I'd be continuing in the rest of the series, but ultimately it's a fairly decent young adult book that obviously talks about a young trans character and her progress through becoming a witch and her journey and meeting other people and getting close to these people and maybe having a hint of romance and what her relationship to other people means to her and to them. So I do think that was the best bit about this, probably. So 3 stars for this one. I'm just under 200 pages into Awakened as well, so I reckon it will probably finish. I'll probably finish it this weekend. I'm just about halfway through. We have a lot more to do with the plot surrounding technology at the moment. That kind of is taking centre stage, and this strange AI that is a little bit weird and kind of manipulative and possessive, and our character Wilder trying to engage with it in a way that they think is like a reasonable way, and then other members of the coven being like, hold on, I don't think this is right. We've been introduced to another character as well called Sybil, who is kind of omnipresent and all-seeing, who I think is a really interesting character, and I'm looking forward to see a little bit more from them as well. But it's really interesting about how everyone is engaging with this AI in a different way, and how each of them feel about it and what it kind of means to them, while they're coming from this place of being fairly new to magic and it not being, I mean, I guess maybe the sense that because the magic is so scary and new, that this AI they're just trying to engage with and act like it's normal, whereas the people in the rest of the coven who have had exposure to magic for quite a while being like, whoa, this is, something's wrong here. So I am interested to see how this one's going to play out. I'm going to try and finish it this weekend, and then that's this video done. But I'll let you know what I think when I finish it. I finished Awakened. It's going to be 4 stars. I really did like this one. I think that it has a lot of good things to say about community and working together and being able to have trust and relationships with other people, and kind of allowing yourself to do that. It doesn't have as much of a kind of chosen one focus, but there is a young trans girl who is very powerful. I really like the magic system in here itself. It gives you the ability to kind of like transcend into, well, it's literally ascend. You become awakened and then you have the potential to ascend, and a few characters do have that, and it talks about what that means, and specifically having a young trans girl who has had quite a troubled life having the ability to do that. It really made me think about Her Majesty's Royal Coven. There is a lot of similarities there. I do think that in HMRC the plot is more of a direct Harry Potter play off on the chosen one is a young trans girl, whereas in this one it is less overt in that sense. It's more about being a queer collective and having collective power, I guess, to fight back against technology and the technology that is adapted to what people online have said. And in that sense I feel like you can see all the horrid transphobia spouted by people like J.K. Rowling, and how that kind of comes in the evil AI section of this. I do recommend it. I think that is really a worthwhile read. I'm really glad to have read it, and I'll definitely be looking out for more by A.E. Osworth in the future. I also just really love this cover. I think it's a really nice cover, and so yeah, that is my next book done, which brings me to the end of this video. I feel like it was fairly successful actually. Weird Sisters, Awakened, All Wins. This also brings me to the end of the magical beings part of my D&D series. I have another video, as I said, that you can check out, but I'm going to call it here and only do 2 videos on the mages, because there are countless books about magical people in this world, and if I kept on reading them for different parts in this video series, we'd be here forever. The next one that I am planning to do is Paladins. I'm just waiting for a book release that comes out in September. I'm potentially going to do it in October, because there's another book that I would really like to read, which I think could work well for it, so look out for that at some point soon-ish. There is a very obvious book that I will be reading for the Paladins video, cough cough, Paladin's Grace, which I'm really excited to get to as well. So look out for that in the future, but in the meantime I'll see you in my next video.